Welcome to our Thursday nights working through John. We're going through the whole Gospel of John, just trying to find out more of who Jesus is and what that might mean for us during this season. And we're actually going to continue working through John through Lent. So we've got some quite chunky, meaty passages to get through, and we're going to go on this journey together that will take us through to Easter. And we're going to get through the whole book, which is quite exciting. So today's passage is quite long, but it's going to be really good, and there's going to be some really good things that come from it. So we're starting at chapter 7, verse 14, and we're going to go through the whole rest of the chapter. Are you going to start us off?
Yeah, amazing. So last time we looked at the start of this story. This is a story that's centered on what's called the Festival of Tabernacles, or is known nowadays more as Sukkot. And if you want to look at last time's video, you'll see where we're at so far. Not until halfway through the festival did Jesus go up to the temple courts and begin to teach. The Jews there were amazed and asked, "How did this man get such learning without having been taught?" Jesus answered, "My teaching is not my own. It comes from the one who sent me. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Whoever speaks on their own does so to gain personal glory. But he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There is nothing false about him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me?" "You are demon-possessed," the crowd answered. "Who is trying to kill you?" Jesus said to them, "I did one miracle, and you are all amazed. Yet, because Moses gave you circumcision, though actually it did not come from Moses, but from the patriarchs, you circumcise a boy on the Sabbath. Now, if a boy can be circumcised on the Sabbath, so that the law of Moses may not be broken, why are you angry with me for healing a man's whole body on the Sabbath? Stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly." Rich.
Yeah.
Rich.
I mean, it feels like he highlights again that obedience to the Father, like that is knowing who he's come from and who he's following, who he's being obedient to. And I think it's just so clear that you can't study the scriptures and know he's doing the will of God, but actually if you know the Father, when you try and live out that will, and that's a heart kind of thing, that you will know that he is doing the will of God. That actually it's not about learning, but it's about wanting to do the will of God. And I think he just really seems to just show them up in terms of how they're treating the law. It talks about appearances, it talks about how they're complaining that he's not following the law, but actually they're kind of picking and choosing whether you circumcise on the 8th day or whether you keep the Sabbath. And actually saying you're just looking at appearances, you're looking at things at a surface level. Actually, you're not thinking about what the law is for, that it shows the redemptive purposes of God. You're just looking to judge people. And actually what you need to be doing is saying, what is the heart of God? What should I do that is shown in the law, that shows the true heart of God? And that's what comes through to me, that if they knew the law, they would knew that Jesus comes to fulfill it.
That's really rich, isn't it? Really rich. And I think there's this sense of they're searching in the scriptures, and as Jesus says elsewhere, you search through the scriptures because you think that in them you might find life, but you refuse to come to me. And Jesus is saying, actually, the law points to the character of God, which Jesus is the embodiment of. Jesus is the revealing of. It's really rich, really rich. Can we carry on?
Yeah. So verse 25, at that point, some of the people of Jerusalem began to ask, "Isn't this the man they are trying to kill? Here he is speaking publicly, and they are not saying a word to him. Have the authorities really concluded that he is the Messiah? But we know where this man is from. When the Messiah comes, no one will know where he is from." Then Jesus, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, "Yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. I am not here on my own authority, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him, but I know him because I am from him and he sent me." At this they tried to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come. Still many in the crowd believed in him. They said, "When the Messiah comes, will he perform more signs than this man?" The Pharisees heard what the crowd were whispering, such things about him. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. Jesus said, "I am with you for only a short time, and then I am going to the one who sent me. You will look for me, but you will not find me, and where I am, you cannot come." The Jews said to one another, "Where does this man intend to go that we cannot find him? Will he go where our people live, scattered among the Greeks, and teach the Greeks? What did he mean when he said, 'You will look for me, but you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come'?"
Wow. So we've got loads of different threads weaving into this, and it might seem a little bit dense and complicated, but they're all threads that we've been teasing out in some of the videos that we've been journeying through John. So we've got the thread of conflict when Jesus feeds the 5,000, and then this brings about such an exciting reaction from the crowd that it talks about at one point them wanting to make him king by force, wanting to make him the ruler, and he shirks away from that. He teaches them in such a way to kind of drive them away. There's the thread of conflict after he heals a man on the Sabbath and is challenging interpretation of the scriptures, interpretation of the law, saying, actually, there's something else. This is pointing to me and what I'm doing. There's this thread of the festival. There's this thread of, like we spoke about last time, about the politics involved in remembering the Exodus and remembering the provision of the land. There's something about the people. They talk about the Jews scattered throughout the world and the diaspora, and there's a sense of what it means to be the people of God outside of the land and being the ones that God have chosen. There's all these different threads coming together, and in it, Jesus starts to say, "Where I'm going, you will not come." Jesus has alluded before to the cross and to this journey. But as we start to progress now in the Gospel of John, and we're coming to the real trigger chapters in the middle of the book, where there's going to be a hinge and it's going to change quite significantly the story, the allusions become much clearer. Where I'm going, you can't come. You can't die the death that I will die, because the death that I will die is the death of the Son of God. And that's going to be where God brings the threads of what he's been doing in the law, in the festivals, in the land, in the people. He's going to bring them all together in the cross and do something. And this just elicits confusion. On one level, they're all searching in all these different areas to try and find hope, to try and find meaning, to try and find what God is doing. And yet, as they search in all these different areas, they miss the way that all of these things point towards Jesus.
I mean, it feel like it comes back to the end of what we just read, where they just see the appearance, they just can't see anything deeper. And I know it's probably quite easy for us to say when we know what happens, but there is that sort of, feels like just they're just seeing what's in front of their eyes, nothing kind of deeper, no deeper meaning.
And I think it's written in that way that we who know Jesus see this, and we see the kind of lack of understanding. It's a little bit, the writer of John's Gospel is breaking the fourth wall. He's constantly kind of looking at the audience and going, they asked this question, they said this thing. Can you believe they would say that? Mm-hmm. Can you believe they would question this about Jesus? But it's going to lead to more and more division. Some people are amazed by what Jesus does and amazed by his teaching, and yet it starts to stir up more and more conflict. Mm. But actually, Jesus stirs that conflict seemingly a little bit deliberately as well. So next few verses, take us away, Rich.
So 37. On the last and greatest day of the festival, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from within them." By this he meant the Spirit, whom those who believed in him were later to receive. Up to that time, the Spirit had not been given, since Jesus had not yet been glorified. On hearing his words, some of the people said, "Surely this man is the prophet." Others said, "He is the Messiah." Still others asked, "How can the Messiah come from Galilee? Does not scripture say that the Messiah will come from David's descendants and from Bethlehem, the town where David lived?" Thus the people were divided because of Jesus. Some wanted to seize him, but no one laid a hand on him.
I mean, this is a dramatic thing. And again, just remember the context. So this is the biggest of the three great pilgrimage festivals. All of Israel, all of the people of God have gathered in Jerusalem at the temple. Maybe Israel's the wrong word to use there, because it's kind of like the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, but it's the Jews would be John's term for it. But the people of Israel, the people of God, have all gathered together, and Jesus stands up in the temple courts on the greatest, most significant, symbolic part of the festival, a festival spoken about in the scriptures, practiced by their ancestors, full of richness and meaning, and says these words: I am living water. Come to me if you're thirsty. If you come to me and receive the living water that I am, you'll have rivers of life bubbling within you. Now that just teases out so many rich scriptures in the Hebrew Bible. Water was really significant at Sukkot. When we think about Moses, and there's lots of interplay in this passage between kind of Jesus and Moses, you saw Moses giving manna in the wilderness, and I am the bread of life. Moses gave you circumcision, and I am one healing on the 8th day. And then here we have the water of Moses, and I am giving you living water. Moses led the people through the Red Sea. That's kind of the really significant water moment that birthed the people of God. But then there's also the time where he strikes the rock at Horeb when they're thirsty and dehydrated in the desert, questioning what's going on and where God is leading them. God calls Moses to strike the rock, and water comes out. But there's also the second time when that happens, where Moses strikes a rock and water comes out. But actually that moment, Meribah, is a moment of disobedience, is a moment where God has asked Moses to speak to the rock, not strike it, but speak to the rock and let water come out. And it's because of that incident that Moses isn't able to enter the promised land. So there's this sense of the richness of water, but also the limitations of Moses and what he could do. And Jesus is not within those limits. It also starts to pick up loads of other verses. A verse that people often cite is, I think it's Isaiah 50. Is it Isaiah? Maybe look that up. But around Isaiah 50, when it talks about streams of water flowing in the desert when God brings his restoration and restores his people. There's the beautiful image in Ezekiel of the water that flows from the temple, and it brings life and healing, not just for Israel, but for the nations, as God's presence goes out from Jerusalem to the world. And Jesus here is talking about living water. There's this richness to that. And there's this sense that the people of God, the people of Judea during this time, they're trying to interpret Jesus in light of the scriptures and what they know. And Jesus says, no, you interpret the scriptures in light of me. If you come to me, you will understand what this festival is all about. If you come to me, you will understand what God has been doing through the land and through his people. If you come to me, you will understand what the scriptures are pointing to. And that's just incredible and rich. And yet you can understand just how controversial and how much that stirred up the crowd.
I mean, he's saying he's the fulfillment of the very reason that they're there. It's a big it's a big statement.
Huge.
When he's not approved of. It's to say that you can understand kind of the reaction.
Definitely. And definitely when you think of what we spoke about last time, as well, when we were talking about all the politics involved and all the stirring up. And Jesus kind of just cuts across that and says, this isn't about your politics and your expectations. This is about the character of God being revealed in me. So here we have the kind of last bit of the reaction. Finally, the temple guards went back to the chief priests and to the Pharisees, who asked them, why didn't you bring him in? No one's ever spoke the way this man does, the guards replied. You mean he's deceived you also? The Pharisees retorted. Have any of the rulers or of the Pharisees believed in him? No, but this mob that knows nothing of the law, there is a curse on them. Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus earlier and who was one of their own number, asked, does our law condemn a man without first hearing him to find out what he has been doing? They replied, are you from Galilee too? look into it and you will find that a prophet does not come out of Galilee.
It's quite like, it's just really short, that last bit, but there's quite a lot in there. But it's
really
also
big.
quite simple. I think you've got the like simple faith of the guards that have just heard these words and are amazed. But then I think you've got the leaders not actually engaging in conversation or debate or even reason. You know what Nicodemus shares. They're just kind of putting people down. And I think the way that they see the ordinary people, I think you see it here. They call them a mob, and that they're easily deceived. There's a curse on them.
They know nothing of the law.
They know nothing of the law, and I think there's a lesson in there for leaders, and also our kind of discernment of leaders, that actually how people treat ordinary people and see them. I think we look at this, and there is that judgment and just lack of love there, or understanding for ordinary people, and I think that the lack of the way that they respond to Nicodemus, are you from Galilee too? It's just like this belittling, isn't it? And rather than trying to see the deeper things that are going on, or trying to have that heart of understanding the law or understanding what God is doing, there's just this trying to stamp on things, and that is their reaction to what is happening here. And just like, it can't possibly be Jesus because he's from Galilee. It seems very simplistic response, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting, that, Rach. Like that whole thought of they're so obsessed about like the purity of interpretation of the people and making divisions. And the word Pharisee, often people talk about possibly coming from the Aramaic paris, which means fence, to kind of separate themselves, to separate themselves to God, to put up more boundaries around the law, that they would keep it holy and pure, and in that way, you know, bring about God's blessings and God's restoration. But often when we do that, when we look for those divisions between people, we miss what God's doing. And what is the history of the church but, you know, in ancient and modern times, but a history of divisions and splitting hairs. And
Yeah. And they obviously didn't know enough of Jesus. And I think that feels like a bit of a warning for leaders and for people that are maybe follow, you know, in a time of YouTube and Instagram and all those things out there. I think I look at the way they treated people, and I look that they didn't quite know enough about Jesus. They didn't really know him. And I think, there's a bit of that warning there of seeing how leaders and how Christians in general treat people, and do the way that they talk and live really show the fruit of somebody that spent time with Jesus, and the way that he treated ordinary people is such a contrast.
I think that's a rich thought. If you've watched these videos, you probably realise often what we like to do is kind of build up the context of the original passage and then say, does that resonate with today? And I think this was a time of crisis. You know, that's why they're all searching for the Messiah. They're debating about whether Jesus is this Redeemer, this Rescuer, this King who's going to come and bring transformation. And we're in a place where people are similarly seeking a way out, seeking transformation, seeking difference. And people, you know, have voted to try and bring about something different. People are suffering through a pandemic, aching for the end of it, aching for something different. And in the midst of that, you've got people trying to interpret the Bible in a more pure way. You've got people who are celebrating festivals, and, you know, we're about to start that Lenten journey to Easter. You've got people who are debating with one another. And I think in all of that, I think what you just said, actually, all of the things that we're going through, they're supposed to point to Jesus and bring us to that simplicity of faith. So I hope as we carry on in John, and as this journey takes us to Easter and we start this time through Lent of digging through the whole of the book, I pray that you would find the simplicity of faith and hope in Jesus, that you would see that all that you are seeking is pointing to him.
Amen.
Amen.